Gray wolves howled across the moon-washed hills of the Wolfswood, their distant lament threading through the stillness of pre-dawn and slipping like cold fingers beneath Winterfell's granite walls. Lyanna Stark leaned against the ancient heart tree in the Godswood, breath steaming in the bitter air. Gloved hands clasped around a small bundle wrapped in black velvet. The bark of the weirwood pressed ridges into her back. Its carved face regarded her through bleeding eyes, witness to secrets older than any house or crown. She had stood here on countless dawns, courting the hush before waking. But never had the quiet seemed so brittle. Never had each heartbeat rung so loud. A memory pulled at her. The tourney at Harrenhal, the fateful crown, the scent of blue winter roses crushed beneath her gauntlet, and the look in Rhaegar's pale, haunted eyes when he pressed the bloom into her lap. Prophecy. He had whispered that night beneath the scorched stones of the ruined keep. Blood and flame. Ice and song. His voice had trembled, not with fear, but with wonder, as though the future itself had brushed his cheek. Lyanna had laughed then, bright and defiant. But the laugh had fled her lips halfway born, for in his hands she had seen something glitter, iridescent, impossibly smooth, heavy as a cannonball yet light as a lie. She unfolded the velvet now. A dragon's egg. The thought alone made her pulse quicken. In daylight the shell shimmered like stained glass. Ripples of pearl, amethyst and pewter, as though the storm clouds of summer had been trapped forever within its curves. But here, beneath the crimson leaves, it glowed faintly from within, heat beating against her skin. Rhaegar had pressed it into her palms on the final night before they parted. "You are more Valyrian than any born beneath the shadow," he had said, voice raw with conviction. "Your veins remember what the world has forgotten. One day, when blood and need are one, you will wake what sleeps inside." She had scoffed at talk of Valyria. She, a North-born wolf-maid, whose greatest sin was riding like a boy and refusing the bonds her sex demanded. But now the egg thrummed, and the distance between tales and truth felt dangerously thin. Maester Luwin would brand the notion madness, and even Benjen. Sweet, wide-eyed Benjen, who kept every secret she offered, would blanch if he saw the thing. Yet in the wolf dreams that had hounded her nights these past months, she had tasted ash in the air and felt scales beneath her fingertips. Somewhere in the heart of those dreams, a winged shadow coiled, waiting for her call. A thin crust of ice filmed the surface of the pool at her feet. She knelt, set the egg beside her, unfastened the leather ties at her wrist, and tugged the glove free. Pale skin greeted the frigid dark, marred only by a faint, silvery line where Arik of the Kingsguard had nicked her during the melee. She should have left then, climbed the ramparts, and laughed at her own foolishness. Instead, she produced a small iron knife, no larger than a sewing awl. The blade flashed, silver catching moon. A single, shallow cut, opened just below her thumb. Blood welled, Stark blood, wolf blood, blood older than memory, and spattered onto the shell. At first, nothing. The crimson droplets slid across the smooth surface and pooled in the whorls between scales. Lyanna's shoulders sagged with relief and disappointment in equal measure. But then warmth surged, the heat of a midsummer bonfire, startling in the icy hush. Lines of faint light climbed the shell like veins of fire opal. A crack, hair-thin, spidered from the crown and forked in 3 directions. Lyanna jerked her hand away, heart hammering. The Godswood held its breath. Even the wolves fell silent. She wrapped the egg again, cradling it close, pulse thrumming against velvet. The light within subsided, but the warmth did not. It beat steadily, like a second heart beneath her own. She pressed a trembling palm to the shell. It pulsed. Not a trick of night and fear. Not the exaggeration of a girl's fancy. Life. She staggered upright and turned toward the shadowed arch that led back to the courtyard. Snowflakes drifted from a slate sky as the first true light of morning bled crimson along the eastern rim. In the bailey, grooms bustled about, stamping feet, blowing on hands, readying horses for the day's ride. Above the gatehouse, The direwolf banner of House Stark snapped and snapped again, impatient with the wind. Lyanna tugged her wolf fur cloak tight, egg hidden in its folds, and slipped along the western parapet toward the stables. Wind gnawed her cheeks, and the taste of iron lingered on her tongue. What was she doing? What would she do if the shell split outright? A hatchling was fire made flesh. Howling, ravenous, born of war, and destined for ruin. The North knew nothing of dragons but bone and ash. She could no more keep such a creature hidden than she could hide the sunrise. Yet the thought of surrendering him, she realized, naming the unseen life within, filled her with a grief too large for breath. Somewhere in Rhaegar's cryptic assurances, in the old Valyrian runes he had traced on her palm, she sensed a promise. The child of her blood would not be a weapon only, but a herald of change. Dragons had ended realms, yes, but they had also bound the Seven Kingdoms in unlikely peace. If the world poised again upon the blade edge between darkness and dawn, who was she to let fear rule? She palmed the cut with a kerchief, wincing as cloth stuck to tacky blood. Brethren of the Night's Watch claimed the cold deadened pain, but her hand throbbed in time with the egg. Inside the stable, the scent of hay and horseflesh enveloped her, warm and familiar. Winterfell's grooms greeted her with respectful nods, accustomed to her dawn rides. She chose a gray mare named Frostfall, fleet, sure-footed, with a temper to match her own, saddled quickly, and led her into the yard. No one questioned the bundled parcel she strapped to the front of the saddle, tucked beneath an oilskin. They had learned years ago that Lyanna Stark's silences were best left unbroken. Hooves clattered over the drawbridge. The morning guard hailed her half-heartedly. She raised a gauntleted fist in wordless salute. Then stone gave way to packed snow and the open wild. She urged Frostfall into a brisk canter down the King's Road. The distant pines, a black sawtooth against the paling sky. The wind tore at her hood, snatched away the last tatters of warmth. Yet the bundle at her chest radiated heat enough to keep her fingers limber, like a banked coal cradled against the winter. She rode until Winterfell's towers dwindled behind her, and the world shrank to three colors: the white of snow, the gray of stone, the red gold of dawn. At last, she reined in where a lonely ringfort crowned a low ridge. The ruin predated the ancient kings. A place old Nan claimed was once a bastion of the first men who lit beacons to warn of the others. Tumbled walls, waist-high at their tallest, cradled a ring of flattened earth. Within, snow lay undisturbed, save for the tracks of a lone elk. Lyanna dismounted, led Frostfall to shelter behind crumbling stone, and spread a blanket over the mare's sweaty flanks. She unfastened the oilskin, heart hammering, and set the egg in a nest of dry brush piled in the fort's center. Clouds bruised the sky above, promising more snow. She knelt, struck flint to steel, and coaxed sparks into the tinder. Flames danced upward, hungry and bright. The egg shone, scales refracting firelight into a kaleidoscope that painted her face in shifting hues. She waited. Minutes crawled, each measured by the crackle of wood and the drip of melted ice from her cloak. After a time the shell pulsed again. One heartbeat, two, three, and a thin scream, piercing and frail yet unmistakably alive, rose from within. Lyanna's breath caught. She reached out but drew back, unwilling to hurry what ancient rites decreed. Smoke curled through her hair, stinging her eyes. The first crack widened. A shard the size of a coin fell inward, revealing darkness, and then a gleam of molten gold. Another scream. Stronger. The egg shuddered, split, and collapsed in on itself. Lyanna blinked away tears as a small, wet creature tumbled into the coals. Instinct overrode caution. She thrust a gloved hand into the flames and scooped the hatchling free. Pain lanced her palm where heat found the cut, but she did not flinch. Tiny claws pricked leather as the creature writhed, shedding bits of shell. It was no larger than a barn cat, wings plastered against its flanks, like damp parchment. Glimmering scales shifted from deep green to hammered bronze. Smoke steamed from its nostrils, She held him close. He opened eyes like chips of wildfire and hissed, a sound half threat, half question. The heat from his body was fierce, yet it did not burn. Lyanna's heart surged with wonder, terror, and an overwhelming filial love she had not expected. The hatchling's gaze fixed on hers, unblinking. He ceased struggling, claws relaxing. A resonant trill, soft as a lullaby, rumbled in his narrow chest. A single snowflake drifted down and sizzled on his snout. He sneezed sparks. Lyanna laughed, an utterly unguarded laugh that felt both strange and right. She tucked him beneath her cloak, against the quilted leather over her heart. He settled instantly, the trilling hum vibrating through her ribs. Outside the ruin, the wind picked up, whistling through empty arrow slits. She doused the fire, scattering embers beneath fresh snow, and stomped until only blackened twigs remained. What now? She dared not ride south. The King's Road swarmed with riders loyal to her brother Brandon, and to Lord Rickard's ancient cause. To them this dragonling might mark treason, proof of entanglement with the Targaryen prince who had vanished with their sister. And to ride north, to the Wall, to the haunted lands beyond, was folly beyond measure. Still, the Wall's black shadow tugged at her thoughts. Years ago, when Benjen had spoken of his desire to take the Black, Maester Luwin had joked that the Night's Watch would welcome any beast so long as it bit wildlings. Could they welcome a dragon? She smiled at the absurdity, then sobered. Secrets, she realized, rarely stayed buried long in the north. Ravens gossiped. Snow told tales. If word reached King's Landing that a dragon had risen, Robert Baratheon's wrath would fall upon Winterfell in storms of steel. Robert's love for her was fierce, but his hatred of dragons fiercer still. She remembered his talk of ridding the realm of Targaryen madness root and branch. He would see no difference between Rhaegar and an infant hatchling. A flutter beneath her breast drew her gaze downward. The little dragon shifted, nipping idly at the laces of her jerkin. She scratched the curve of his neck. Tiny scales sparkled like morning frost. "What am I to call you?" she murmured. Names from Valyrian lore drifted through her mind. Balerion, Vermithor, Morgul. Too grand, too heavy with death. She thought of the blue rose Rhaegar had placed in her lap, of the frost that limbed its petals. Cerys, she decided softly. Valyrian for winter sun. The hatchling chirped, as though pleased. Lyanna glanced toward the King's Road. Tracks marred the fresh snowfall. 8, maybe 10 riders, judging by the churned path. They led north, not south. Scouts, perhaps, or a hunting party from White Harbor. She cursed under breath. Time thinned like ice in spring. She needed sanctuary where eyes were few and loyalty absolute. A spark of memory flared. The abandoned watchtower at the mouth of the long lake, half a day's ride east, used now only by trappers. Food was scarce there, but fish teemed beneath the ice, and the hearth still drew when chimney stones were cleared. She mounted Frostfall once more, careful to cradle Cerys beneath her arm. Hoarfrost coated the mare's mane. Her breath smoked in great gusts. Lyanna urged her onto a deer path that curved away from the road, winding through dense pine where snow lay undisturbed, save for rabbit spoor. The forest absorbed hoofbeats, leaving only the drone of wind and the crunch of ice beneath iron shoes. Hours passed in mute procession. The dragonling dozed, belly warm against her ribs, waking only when hunger pinched. Each time his thin whine rose, she coaxed him to suckle droplets of blood from the healing cut on her hand. Old magic, perhaps, or simple instinct guided him. Each sip left her dizzy, but the bond between them strengthened. By mid-morning she felt his moods like shifting weather. Hunger, curiosity, the quick flare of annoyance when a snow-laden branch brushed his snout. Sun crested the treetops when the tower came into view. Moss devoured half the stones, and the roof sagged like a drunkard's cap, but the lower chamber remained intact. Lyanna dismounted, wrestled the swollen door ajar, and led Frostfall inside. She loosed the mare's girth, spread fresh straw, and set about kindling a fire in the corner hearth. Smoke spiraled up the chimney, chased by sparks. Sarah stirred at the scent of flame, scrambling from her cloak to perch on the hearthstone. Tiny wings unfurled, drying in the warmth, translucent membranes glimmering. Lyanna watched, entranced, as he stalked a stray beetle scuttling across the flagstones. One pounce, a snap, and the beetle vanished. He preened, self-satisfied, and belched a wisp of smoke. She laughed softly, the sound mingling with the crackle of fire. From her saddlebag she produced strips of dried venison, soaking them in a tin cup of boiling snowmelt until soft. Cerys attacked the meat with fierce delight, needle teeth tearing furrows. His belly distended, scales rippling. Afterward, he crept beneath her arm, wings twitching, and fell asleep. Lyanna eased onto a threadbare pallet by the wall. Through a slit window she saw pale sunlight slant across the long lake, blinding where it struck open water. Somewhere out there fish leapt, unmindful of wars and kings. How long could she remain hidden? Days, perhaps. Weeks if luck held. But winter closed fast. Snow would bury the tower until only its crown showed, and supplies would dwindle. When the lake froze solid, she would have to range farther for food. And what of Rhaegar? Rumors were flint sparking on dry tinder. Whispers of a rebellion brewing in the Stormlands. Of Jon Arryn defying the king's command to give up Robert and Eddard. If war erupted, the hatchling might prove salvation. Or damnation. She pictured dragons wheeling over frozen fields, their fire-bathing armies in gold light, and shuddered at the beauty and horror of it. Sarah stirred, eyes half-lidded, and chirped softly. She stroked his spine until he settled again. The little tower room smelled of wood smoke, horse and hatchling musk. A sharp, resinous scent like pine sap on hot stone. Lyanna closed her eyes, exhaustion thick in blood and bone. For the first time since the tourney, she allowed herself to imagine tomorrow without chains of duty binding every breath. In her mind's eye she saw Robb, still colt-legged with youth, laughing as he chased Arya along Wintertown's muddy streets. She saw Eddard's quiet smile, the way his eyes softened when he spoke of family. She saw Brandon, reckless, proud, storm-browed, as he rode south to demand her honor. Would any of them understand what she had done this dawn? Would they see a betrayal of wolf blood, or the birth of something that might yet save them from the spinning knives of history? Sleep claimed her. She dreamed she was on a field of snow lit by green fire. A dragon, full-grown and glorious, circled above, scales the hue of northern lights. Its roar split the sky, and the wind answered with voices of long-dead kings. She raised a sword of ice, and the blade sang a name she could not decipher. At her feet, shadows stretched into endless night. When she woke, dusk had fallen. The fire burned low, casting long, jittering shapes on stone walls. Cerys stood atop the hearth, head cocked, staring at the door. Frostfall stamped nervously. Lyanna rose, every muscle protesting, and reached for her sword. A moment later came the knock. Soft, hesitant, yet undeniable. "Lyanna." The voice was muffled, wind-torn, but she knew it at once. "Benjen." She exhaled one silent curse and crossed the room. Through the warped wood, she heard him shift from foot to foot. "Sister, are you there? The garrison said you rode out before dawn. Father grows worried. Please." His plea hung in the brittle air. Lyanna glanced over her shoulder. Cerys puffed himself larger, neck frills flaring, smoke leaking from between bared teeth. One cry and the secret would topple. She pressed a finger to her lips, heart thundering. The hatchling's eyes glowed, but he remained silent. She cracked the door, enough to peer out. Benjen's cheeks were raw from wind, his cloak rimed with ice. Relief flooded his dark eyes at the sight of her. "What are you doing out here alone?" he whispered. "Brandon's men ride the woods searching for you. If they find you." "Ben," she said softly, "I need your help." He frowned, gaze flicking past her shoulder. "Are you hurt?" "No." She hesitated. Snow swirled around him like restless ghosts. In that moment she understood there could be no turning back. Secrets demanded trust, as sure as swords demanded steel. She opened the door wider. A gust swept in, guttering the fire. Benjen stepped inside, stamping snow from boots. His eyes adjusted and fixed on the hearth. On Cerys. For a heartbeat neither moved. Then Benjen inhaled sharply. "By the old gods," he breathed. Cerys hissed, wings mantling. Lyanna closed the door with decisive finality. "This is why I left," she said, voice so low it barely carried. "He was born this morning. Born of my blood." She lifted her bandaged hand. Benjen's gaze flicked between her and the dragonling. Amazement warred with fear. "Does father know?" "No one." She stepped forward, laying a gentle palm on her brother's arm. "You've always kept my secrets. I need you to keep this as well." Benjen swallowed. "A dragon," he whispered. "Real as..." Words failed him. He knelt slowly, closer to hearth level. Cerys watched, unblinking. When Benjen extended a cautious hand, the hatchling sniffed, then butted his knuckles with a smoky trill. Lyanna's chest loosened. Tears pricked unbidden. "I've named him Cerys." Benjen nodded, still enthralled. "You cannot stay here, not with riders combing the woods. The tower's smoke might already have drawn eyes." "We must..." "Must what?" she asked. "Return to Winterfell. March through the gates with a dragon at my shoulder." "Hide him," Benjen said, glancing up. "Deep in the crypts. The lowest levels where old Nan swears the lamps burn with ghost fire. No one goes there now, not even father. The walls are thick as the wall itself." He rose, resolve kindling. Lyanna considered. The crypts were dark, but dry. Warmth from geothermal springs seeped through stone, enough to keep ice from forming even in the coldest nights. Old kings lay entombed with iron swords across their laps to guard against the coming of the others. Would they stir if a dragon roosted among them? Or would they rest easier knowing their wolf bloodline harbored fire anew? Decision settled like a blade into its sheath. "Very well," she said. "We leave now, under moonlight. We travel the hunter's paths. No torches." She collected her few belongings, doused the hearth with snowmelt, and wrapped Cerys in her cloak. The hatchling protested, claws snagging wool. But she soothed him with a whisper and a touch of bloodied fingers to his snout. He licked the wound clean. Sighing smoke, Benjen fetched 2 bundles of kindling for show. Should anyone see them ride? The guise of siblings gathering firewood. They saddled Frostfall and Benjen's rangy gelding, then slipped into the falling dark. The forest swallowed them. Snow fell thicker. Smothering sound. Cerys slept, content, warmth bleeding through layers to toast Lyanna's skin. She followed Benjen's shadow through narrow deer trails, over frozen creeks, beneath archways of frost-laden pine. Thought drifted. Of crypts, of ghosts, of dragons shattering an age of frost into shards of forgotten fear. Somewhere above the clouds, stars watched. She felt their cold gaze and did not shy away. Hours later, Winterfell's lights glimmered through the storm like drowned candles. Guards on the battlements paced, hoods hunched, unaware of the miracle that approached beneath their very noses. At Benjen's whispered command, they slipped through a postern gate, down a stair seldom used save by kennel masters. A narrow door in the base of the first keep opened into blackness that smelled of dust and ancient stone. Here began the crypts. Lyanna's boots whispered over steps carved centuries ago. The walls grew damp, then warm, then hot as blood. Benjen bore a single hooded lamp, flame-shielded. Shadows crawled among stone kings. Wolves of carved granite leered atop mottled sarcophagi. At the lowest level, where even legend rarely strayed, they found a chamber whose air trembled with unseen heat, rising from the heart of the earth. Lyanna laid her cloak on a slab unclaimed by statue or name, and lifted Cerys into the glow of the lamplight. The hatchling blinked, pupils flaring wide in gloom. He stretched, wings brushing stone, and cried. A clear, ringing note that echoed off vaulted arches and slipped between the lips of dead kings. Lyanna knelt beside him. "Your kingdom," she whispered. Benjen placed the lamp in a niche and stepped back, awe etched in every line of his face. "We'll bring meat," he promised. "And water." "No," she said softly. "Fire and blood." Sarah's eyes mirrored the lamplight. A conflagration contained, for now. Lyanna stroked his crest, feeling warmth surge in answer. Somewhere far above, snow continued to fall. Here, beneath the earth, spring had come in secret, and with it, the first beat of wings that might one day shatter the sky. A hush settled, deeper than silence, thick with breathless possibility. Lyanna inhaled, tasting iron and ash upon the air. And in that moment, she knew the choices of dawn had bound her future to scales and shadow. The road stretched long ahead, fraught with war and sacrifice. But for now she listened only to the soft rasp of scale on stone and the answering thunder of her own heart. A cadence older than fear. And in the gloom of ancient kings, Bloodfire dreamed of flight. "Oh, Ka." Benjen returned to the upper keep before dawn, boots splattered with sludge from the kennel stair, nostrils raw with the stink of tallow and wet dog. No alarm bells rang. No watchman cried his lateness. He slipped past dozing guards and into the still warm kitchens, where a single pot of barley stew simmered for the night shift. Cook's boy Willem, freckled and half asleep, barely glanced up when Benjen lifted the lid. "Riders from the Dreadfort, sir," the boy mumbled around a yawn. "They'll want broth when they arrive." Benjen grunted assent, ladled 2 bowls, and carried them to a shadowed alcove near the rear stair. There he hid them behind a cracked wine cask, one for Lyanna, one for himself, then took the long route to the great hall, forging faint signs of a sleepless night into credible fatigue. Rickard Stark presided over the dawn meal, already armored, leather brigandine laced with silver wolf heads. His eyes, iron gray like the Barrowlands, tracked Benjen's approach. "You were abroad," he said, low enough that only Maester Lewin and Brandon might hear. Benjen dipped his head. "Lyanna rides at first light." "I sought her trail, my lord." "Not quite lie nor truth." Rickard studied him, as though weighing the shape of his son's soul, then turned away. Benjen swallowed a tremor. Secrets nested easily in spoken words, far harder in the silence between. Beneath 6 stories of stone, Lyanna sat cross-legged on the crypt floor, bowl warming her numb fingers while steam curled up the vaulted ceiling and mingled with the dragon smoke. Cerys crouched on the rim, lapping stew with a quick, darting tongue. Each swallow sent a ripple along his belly scales. Still soft as wet leather, Lyanna winced at the scrape of claws against bronze-rimmed oak. Rickon Stark's coffin lid, unused for 200 years. "Easy, little lord," she whispered. He churred, eyes narrowing in pleasure at the taste of rendered fat. A heartbeat later, she heard it, the marginal difference between true silence and another body's breath. She stiffened, hand drifting toward the hunting knife at her thigh. "Ben?" she called. Echo swallowed the name. Stone Kings loomed, their direwolves muzzle to paw. She rose, shadows uncoiled beyond the faint halo cast by the tallow lamp. Out of that hush stepped old Nan, crooked as a yew root, shawl trailing dust. Lyanna's throat closed. "Child," the old woman rasped. "I've kept the king's company longer than yon maesters kept quills. Thought I heard a babe cry where babes oughtn't." Her milk-filmed gaze drifted to Cerys. The dragon stilled, head cocked, membrane flickering over molten eyes. Smoke curled from his nostrils. Lyanna placed herself between them. "It was only a fox, Nan. You risk a fall in these stairs." "Ay," Nan said, voice gone soft with awe. "If that be a fox, may the others take my bones." She shuffled closer, fearless. "I suckled Brandon's grandsire. Fed him tales of the winged shadow when he cut teeth. Told him fire remembers. And here it does." Lyanna's heart hammered. "If you speak of this." Old Nan's shroud is half woven. She lifted a trembling hand, touched her own lined cheek. My lips will close tight soon enough. Let a dying woman warm her fingers. Slowly, Lyanna stepped aside. Cerys watched the newcomer, tongue flicking. Nan knelt with painful slowness and extended a bony palm. The hatchling sniffed, then bumped her knuckle, issuing a pleased croon. Nan's thin smile deepened every wrinkle. Just so. Valyrian beasts knew crone's milk once. They mined kinship. She looked up. Keep him deep. When his wings broaden, stone will not bar his going. Lyanna swallowed. You'll help us? I'll spin more ghost stories for the kitchen girls. Keep them away from cold tunnels. She rose, joints cracking. But girl, remember, fire cannot stay buried forever. Best choose who you burn. Then she retreated into shadow, shawl whispering like wings. Days passed, measured by the rhythm of stolen meals and the soft thunder of leathern wings unfurling in the dark. Cerys doubled in length within a fortnight. His scales hardened from dusky green to tarnished bronze. His flame sharpened from sparks to finger-length tongues that hissed each time he tasted air. Lyanna bore new scars along her forearms where excitable claws raked during playful flights across the crypt vaults. Benjen fashioned a perch from a spear haft wedged between two sarcophagi, wrapping the wood with rawhide to spare the hatchling's talons. At night they listened to him beat his wings, testing the high roof, sending echoes rippling like unseen bats. Above, Winterfell buzzed with rumor. The riders from the Dreadfort arrived, then Karstarks from Karhold, then Manderleys glittering beneath ermine cloaks. Courtyard talk told of Robert Baratheon gathering storm knights in the Vale, and Aeron refusing the king's writ. Smiths hammered mail day and night. Old Sir Roderick drilled squires until their arms shook from shield weight. Lyanna tasted war in the air, the way others tasted snow. On the 15th night, Brandon returned from River Run, hair wind-snarled and eyes wild. He strode into the great hall demanding audience. Lyanna, lurking by a pillar, felt her brother's fury before his words took shape. Rhaegar took her, he shouted, voice echoing off rafters. I rode to King's Landing to the Red Keep itself, but Aerys would not speak. I saw knights in white cloaks whisper, saw basilisks minding every corner. They hide her. Lyanna stiffened. Did he mean Elia, or some other? Brandon's gaze roamed the hall and snagged on her. He took one step forward, then faltered. Confusion, anger, relief flooded his face all at once. Lyanna? She stepped out. I am here, Brandon. You. Rhaegar. Words broke apart. He reached her, grasped her shoulders as though to feel she was not smoke. Then whose lies filled the realm? Horror dawned. Her disappearance from Harrenhal still fed rumor. We parted months ago, she said carefully. He rides east, I think. Brandon's eyes sharpened. Do you know where? No. Not lie, for she did not. Rhaegar's road had forked the moment he pressed egg into her hand. Brandon exhaled slow steam. Father thinks war may yet be avoided if we prove the prince's guilt. But rumors shift like leaves in wind. I'll not rest until truth is nailed to some door. His grip loosened. And you, ride less, sister. We near winter. He kissed her brow, leaving salt of sweat. Lyanna swallowed guilt. Brandon walked away arm in arm with Lord Rickard, leaving banners of tension snapping behind them. That night she carried 2 chickens, freshly killed, down the crypt stair. Cerys caught scent, head whipping. He leapt, seized one fowl, and crunched bone like dry twigs. Benjen flinched at the noise but forced a grin. Hell want bigger game soon. Boar maybe. Lyanna watched blood drip onto dusty stone. Her courage quavered. I heard father speak with Lord Rickard of provisions. Stores will stretch thin if armies march. Benjen brushed a scale chip from his sleeve. When that day comes, we move him. To where? Deepwood Modded's hot springs? Skagos, even. He shrugged. Away. Lyanna shook her head. There is no away. Only toward. Them? In Dragonstone's wind-scoured chamber of the painted table, Prince Rhaegar Targaryen paced the isles and peninsulas, etched into ancient oak. His maester spoke of ravens, of Lord John Arryn's defiance, of Robert's wrath, of Eddard Stark riding from the Vale, with knights in tow. Rhaegar scarcely heard. A phantom ache tugged his palm where once he carved Valyrian runes into Lyanna's skin. He dreamt nightly of a dragon whose eyes were winter green, and whose flames smelled of pine smoke. The dream left him shaking, fevered with yearning and dread. If the egg had hatched, and his heart told him it had, fate's wheel now spun faster. He traced the north on the painted table, finger-brushing miniature pines, then rested upon Winterfell's carved tower. Too soon, he murmured, yet warmth rushed through the stone beneath his fingertip. Snow came hard on the third moon of Wolf's Year. Drifts swallowed the kennels, ice-sheathed ramparts. Ravens fell dead on the rookery sill, wings burdened by rime before they could beat sky. Fires blazed in every hall, yet chill crept through floor cracks like an assassin. In the crypts, though, geothermal veins turned air to sonothic fog. Cerys basked, wings half spread, eyes hooded in reptilian bliss. Lyanna dozed with her back against a wolf's carved flank, skin slick with sweat despite fur cloak. Dreams coiled with hiss and crackle. She woke to Benjen, shaking her shoulder. "Riders at the gate," he hissed. "Crown's riders. Father summons us all." His gaze flicked to Cerys. "Hide him." Lyanna rose. The dragon, sensing tension, crawled up her arm and draped over her shoulders, talons pricking leather. She coaxed him onto the spear perch, fed him a strip of venison soaked in her blood, and whispered, "Quiet, little son." He settled, lids drooping, flame muttering low in his throat. She and Benjen climbed just as Lord Rickard assembled his household in the yard. 6 Lannister men-at-arms in crimson cloaks flanked a lean knight wearing sunburst helm. Sir Gerald Hightower, Lord Commander of the Kingsguard. Snow spiraled between gold filigree. "Lord Rickard," the White Bull proclaimed, breath clouding. "His Grace King Aerys summons your son Brandon and Eddard Stark to answer for threats against the Crown Prince." Brandon's jaw clenched, but Rickard lifted a hand. "My sons will answer any charge. We are Starks." Hightower's pale eyes flicked to Lyanna, noting the wolf-embroidered cloak, the wild hair spilling from her hood. If rumor painted her stolen, why did she stand here? Doubt etched a line between his brows. "The king demands they come to King's Landing alone, no host." Rickard nodded. Brandon stepped forward, sword belt jingling. "I ride at dawn." Lyanna's stomach turned to brine. She saw fire-lit visions. Brandon before the Red Keep, noose tight, father burning. She saw them all, though such horrors lay still in unborn futures. Cerys stirred in her mind like an ember touched by wind. That night she returned below weeping. Cerys keened at her distress, nuzzling her cheek with hot, dry scales. "Forgive me, little one," she whispered. "I would trade every drop of wolf blood to change tomorrow." She bared the scar on her hand, reopened it with a needle, and let him drink. His flame dulled sorrow's blade, but could not blunt it. Old Nan arrived again, silent as mist. She carried a pouch of powdered bone, grind of dragon teeth. She croaked, "From skulls in the throne room. Fed to hatchlings, they strengthen flame." Lyanna accepted the pouch, overwhelmed. Cerys sniffed, sneezed sparks. Nan watched, eyes bright. "War knocks. Teach him heat enough to meet it." Her cane clicked away into dark. Brandon and Rickard rode south 2 days later, Benjen at their side to the neck. Lyanna remained, jaw set, mind hammering. Each night she trained Cerys as Nan instructed, sprinkling tooth powder on coals, coaxing him to breathe. His flames lengthened, gained color, cobalt at core, amber at edge. Whirls of heat sent dust devils spinning down aisles of kings. More than once stone cracked, spalling sharp chips from vaulted ceiling. Lyanna brushed rubble aside, praying no tremor carried to the keep above. On the 7th night word arrived by Raven. Brandon and Rickard accused of treason, held for trial. Eddard, yet in the Vale, commanded likewise to attend. Benjen returned with hollow eyes. "The Mad King lights pyres in his courtyard," he whispered. "Small folk speak of kings burning their bannermen alive." Lyanna clutched his hand, felt bones like ice slivers. "We ride south," he said. "With what men we may gather." "And leave Cerys?" Despair sharpened her words. Benjen shook his head. "I ride. You remain. Guard our last hope should all else fail." Lyanna wanted to scream, to slash fate's throat. Instead, she kissed her brother's brow as Brandon once had hers. "Return," she said, "or send word." He nodded, eyes shining, then slipped away to ready horses. That dawn she stood upon the battlements, watching a column of men win down the King's Road, Benjen leading what strength Winterfell could still spare. Hoarfrost feathered the merlins. Cerys, tucked beneath her cloak, turned his head, pupils narrowing on the departing wolves. A rumble shook his chest. Half growl, half question. "They fight for us," she murmured. "We keep the fire." Moon phases blurred. Snow piled thigh-deep. Winterfell felt hollow. Echoes where Benjen's laughter once bounced, where Bran's booming voice had joked of mead and melee. Servants moved hushed, as though ghosts lurked in every corridor. Rickard's study remained locked, his ledgers closed like coffin lids. Only the Godswood's heart tree seemed unchanged, weeping sap that froze like rubies on bark. Lyanna's days became routine. Visit the rookery covertly. Intercept ravens bound for the rookery with letters bearing Wolf's Head seal. Slip a coded knot into each, signaling to Eddard, still somewhere in the Vale, that Winterfell held a burning secret. Maester Luwin never detected her tampering. His burdened mind drifted night and day through scrolls of troop numbers and harvest counts. Below, Cerys learned to fly in cramped vaults, launching from perch to perch, wings thumping stale air. When feathers of soot drifted up floor cracks in the old armory, guards blamed faulty chimneys. Lyanna watched, arms crossed, heart splitting with pride and fear. The hatchling's wingspan now stretched wider than her outstretched arms. Soon stone corridors would prove cages. She fashioned a harness from boiled leather, buckles sized for growth, hoping one day to ride him, mad notion. Yet when he settled against her spine and she felt the throb of his hot heart, she believed the world might reshape to fit. A fortnight before first thaw, ravens shrieked over Winterfell thrice in one dusk. The third bore Ned Stark's seal broken, parchment smeared with blood where the bird's claws pierced. Rickard and Brandon dead, burned by Aerys in the Red Keep. Lyanna sank to her knees in the rookery, the letter clutched like a blade point first. Tears blinded. Outside, bells tolled for the dead whose bodies would never cross the neck. Ned, the note explained, had knelt in King's Landing, demanded brother and father's remains. Aerys refused. Ned turned north gathering banners. Robert called his storm lords. The realm burned. That night, Lyanna walked the crypts, singing a lullaby her mother once hummed. Lo, northern thing of wind among high pines. Cerys followed, tail sweeping dust, flame guttering between teeth. He sensed grief, pressed his skull under her palm. "They are gone," she told him, voice cracking. He answered with a warble deep and mournful as a dire wolf's howl. At dawn she saddled Frostfall, bundled meat for the dragon, and rode stealthily to the edge of the Wolfswood. Hidden among firs, she loosened Cerys from harness. He beat wings, snow devils swirling, and for the first time leapt into open sky. Only a dozen feet, then 30, then above the treetops. His cry split the morning hush. Lyanna's throat tightened. He circled thrice, joy drumming through every beat, before settling awkwardly on a great branch. Bark scorched under talons. Pine needles sparked and flared. She coaxed him down with strips of boar's heart, then watched him devour, lipping blood froth. No hunter in the Wolfswood would mistake the prince he left. Time dwindled. Rumor reached Winterfell of Robert's victory on the Trident, Rhaegar slain beneath falling rubies. Lyanna reeled. How could prophecy twist so cruel? She pictured the prince lying face up in river mud, water stealing heat from pale, noble cheeks. Did he feel, in last heartbeat, that the egg he gifted ignited in northern dark? She pressed her brow to cold glass in her tower chamber, and wept for what might have been. That same night, Benjen's raven arrived, short, urgent. Eris dead, Tywin's treachery, sack of King's Landing. Robert proclaimed king. Ned marching south to Storm's End, then Dragonstone. One line at end. Hold the flame. I will come. Weeks later, Ned himself rode through Winterfell's gate bearing wounds half-healed and eyes too old. He embraced Lyanna tight. She felt ribs beneath leather, smelled smoke still clinging to his hair. Behind him rode Howland Reed, 2 crannogmen, and a slender knight in battered Stormguard cloak. Sir Jory Castle kept watch. Winterfell's courtyard seemed suddenly full again, but laughter would not grow there. Alone, in the solar overlooking dusk-lit battlements, Ned told her of madness in the capital. Elia and her babes murdered, Tywin's banners seeded with fear. Robert wore grief and rage in equal measure. He speaks only of you, Ned said. He means to wed before the moon turns. I've delayed, but cannot long. Lyanna's fingers tightened on the chair arm. He must not know of Cerys. Robert's hatred for dragons. I know, Ned whispered. That is why I came ahead of him. Lyanna stared. You rode from King's Landing alone, leaving Robert. And Jon Arryn trails in my dust, I think, Ned said with faint ghost of smile. Robert will cool his heels with wineskins enough. Seriousness returned. Show me. Torch in hand. She led Ned into the crypt. Jory stood guard at the stair, expression tight. Ned's boots echoed between tombs until lamplight kissed bronzed scales. Cerys glimmered, larger than a horse now, wings mantling to fill half the aisle. Ned inhaled sharply. Gods. Lyanna touched the great muzzle. He knows your scent from my thoughts. Cerys nuzzled Ned's hair, warm breath stirring dust. Ned's eyes widened, but he raised a tentative palm, laid it to the dragon's brow. Heat radiated, not painful, like sun on a crisp spring day. He's beautiful, Ned murmured, wonder pushing grief aside. Then sorrow chased wonder. Robert will kill him, unless we hide him better, Lyanna said. Or we show Robert the truth of dragons. Ned met her gaze. Truth matters little to a heart scalded by loss. They talked long among the king's silent ranks. How to spirit Cerys across the wall. Impossible. How to fly him east. He could not yet bear her weight aloft. How to keep him beneath Winterfell. He would soon break stone to seek sky. At last, Ned spoke the thought neither wished. Dragonstone, he said. Ruined now, cleared of Targaryen loyalists. Volcanic tunnels beneath the keep, caverns vast enough. Robert would never sail there, too many memories. Lyanna's pulse quickened. A journey of leagues by sea. I will escort you. Glover ships still answer my call. Hope flickered. Then Ned added, voice grave, but Robert must believe you dead, or stolen anew. Any trail to Dragonstone endangers you both. The words hung, heavy as chain. To vanish from Robert's life meant rending his heart again, and perhaps securing the fragile peace only starting to bloom. Lyanna closed eyes, feeling dragon heat at her back. So be it. Plans spun in secret looms. How Lyanna would ride with Ned to White Harbor, disguised as a squire. How Cerys would fly by night, following their ship's lantern like a lodestar. How old Nan would swear on Mother's grave that the girl harbored dire illness and lay abed for weeks, giving Robert no sight when he arrived. Maester Luwin, sworn to Ned's cause, prepared tinctures that mimicked winter fever in corpses. One would serve as Lyanna's false body, entombed hastily if Robert insisted. Guilt gnawed, but the memory of father's screams, Brandon's strangled gasps, steeled her resolve. 2 days before Robert's column could hope to reach Winterfell, Ned and Lyanna slipped beyond the walls with Howland Reed, Jory, and a dozen hand-picked men. Gray wind whipped banners of snow across the King's Road. The party veered to goat paths and hunter lanes. Cerys launched from the crypt mouth at moonrise, scales glinting in starlight, wings thunder shaping silent earth. No watchman on the battlements looked up. Wind howled too hard. Eyes squinted against driven flakes. They pressed southeast. In daylight, the dragon roosted within pine cloisters, heat melting circles of bare earth. At dusk, he rose, a dark star trailing embers, keeping Lyanna's lantern in sight. Villages they passed whispered of red-eyed spirits above the woods, but snow muffled rumor. At White Harbor's docks their ship awaited, true north, a carrack of sturdy woolmake. Captain Marna Wool curtsied with surprising grace, vowed no coin could buy her tongue. They boarded by night, tarp raised to shroud distinctive stark sigil. Cerys arrived before dawn, splashing into the frigid harbor with hiss of steam, then crawling up the hull leaving charred barnacle husks. Sailors crossed themselves. Howland Reed calmed them with tales of marshworms, gentled by Cranog's song. They swallowed fear for promise of double pay. On the narrow deck, Lyanna stood beside Ned as ropes loosed. Snow fell gentle now, flakes melting on Cerys' hot hide where he curled amid stacked barrels, wings cloaked tight. Deep within hold, casks of pickled herring kept briny company. Marna shouted orders. Oars dipped like long white bones. True North slipped from harbor and turned her prow to the narrow sea. Lyanna watched Winterfell's beacon fade. Tears froze on lashes. Ned squeezed her hand. "Ghosts follow," he murmured. "But they cannot drown you." She forced a nod. Overhead, Cerys lifted his head, sensing her ache, and warbled a note that rose, hopeful, into the gray morning sky. She let the sound carry her fear, her love, her promise into shroud of sea mist. Storms battered them 3 days running. Waves climbed the hull like wroth giants. Rigging snapped. Marna roared over thunder. Cerys clung below deck, wings shielding Lyanna and Ned from rolling barrels. In pitch black he lit small flames to steady sailors' hands patching leaks, steam turning hold to sauna. When at last clouds parted, they sighted the Dragonstone basalt tower sea against dawn's gold. Smoke plumed from Mount Dragontail beyond, crimsoned by sunrise. Marna moored at a half-ruined quay. Fisher huts smoldered, looted weeks ago. Steps carved into cliff wound upward beneath grim gargoyles. Ned escorted Lyanna while Jory carried supplies. Howland led Cerys at a cautious distance, the dragon's talons sparking on obsidian. At summit, the fortress loomed. Dragon-shaped, spines and wings of fused black stone. No sentries greeted them. Only seabirds nested in windows, their cries echoing. Inside, halls gaped empty, tapestries torn. Candelabras toppled, yet heat radiated beneath souls, living heart of island. They followed labyrinthine stairs downward, until air tasted of brimstone. A cavern opened, vast as Winterfell's great hall thrice over, ceiling lost to darkness. Lava veins pulsed, fissured rock. Stalactites dripped molten tears. Cerys stepped forward, sniffed sulfur and roared. The sound filled every crevice, rolled back on itself, set dust avalanching from ledges. Lyanna felt power answer him, ancient, waiting. He unfurled wings, broader than cottage roof now, and leapt. Updrafts of volcanic heat bore him aloft. He wheeled once, twice, then landed on a ridge of black glass, claiming it with a trumpeting cry. Lyanna's knees shook with relief and awe. Ned exhaled. He is home. She nodded, voice lost. Tears traced soot-streaked cheeks. Until the world can endure him. Ned placed a sealed parchment in her hand. My words to Howland's kin. Reed smugglers will bring food thrice each moon until you can hunt. Maester Qyburn in Old Town. Disgraced, yet skilled in hidden arts. Owes me debt. He may mend wounds if you send for him. His gaze softened. When spring comes, if Robert's heart cools, I will send word. If, she echoed. They embraced long. Cerys roared again, and Ned smiled despite all. Tell him to guard you well. He guards more than me now. He guards the realm from its own fears. Then, at last, Ned and his men departed, footfalls swallowed by tunnels. Lyanna stood alone in the cavern, lit by dim red glow. She inhaled scents of sulfur and sea salt, of old stone and new flame. Cerys crawled down the rock face, wings rustling like sailcloth, and settled beside her. She rested her brow to his. "We begin anew," she whispered. "Ice and fire together." Above, gulls wheeled before pale sun. Across narrow sea, Robert Baratheon would thunder questions no maester could answer, hold wreaths for a bride who would never walk his halls. In the crypts of Winterfell, stone kings would guard a tomb that held only snow-filled rags. And in Dragonstone's volcanic veins, a dragon grew beneath the beating heart of the last Valyrian of the North, waiting for the day the world might accept what flame could forge instead of what it could destroy. Lyanna drew her cloak tight, felt heat bloom through wool, and smiled. A small, fierce smile none but Cerys would ever see. Together, they walked deeper into the glow. Footsteps sparking embers that danced upward like newborn stars searching for sky. Ka. Wind howled in the broken teeth of Dragonmont, a ceaseless keening cry that blurred hours into one long sigh of stone and sea. Lyanna paced the rim of a basalt shelf, cloak snapping behind her like a banner torn but defiantly aloft. Below, Cerys spiraled on the boiling thermals that seeped from vents peppering Dragonstone slopes. Each beat of his widening wings scattered shreds of vapor that flashed orange in the glow of the volcanic fissures. He had doubled again in size, his body now 18 hands from snout to tail fork, and carried himself with a confidence that set her heart pounding in equal parts fear and triumph. She lifted a gloved hand. A sharp whistle pierced the gale. Cerys tucked one wing, leaned into a steep dive that made the rock underfoot tremble, then flared at the last instant to alight on the shelf. Heat billowed off him in waves that pushed back the chill of early spring. Lyanna pressed her forehead to the scaled ridge between his eyes. Salt from wind spray had crusted white in every seam of her hair and on the dragon's bronze armor. But his fire scent, cedar smoke, and smelted iron remained untainted. "Good," she murmured, not in praise, but in shared assurance. His pupils shrank to flame-thin slits. His breath rolled over her shoulder in a contented sigh that stank of half-charred goat. He had hunted the western cliffs this dawn, taking his first wild kill without her lure lantern or slingstone guidance. Bones littered the scree below, blackened, cracked, clean. She stepped back, scanning sky and sea. The carrack from White Harbor, wool coin still buying silence as surely as steel, was 2 days overdue. Supply delays mattered less now that Cerys hunted. But the ship also carried letters from Ned, and Ned's counsel was a rope she clung to when the nights grew too vast. She touched the small pouch at her belt, where his last missive lay folded and refolded, until its creases were soft as suede. "Robert weds on the first full moon of summer," it read. "Your tomb is sealed, and the king drinks each night to the memory of your laughter." Benign words on their face. Between the lines, Ned confessed dread that the lie would curdle Robert's heart forever to bitterness. Yet the lie had to hold, or flame and war would meet again. Lyanna turned toward the mouth of the main volcanic gallery, Cerys pacing at her heel. Wind thrust against her back as they descended a twisting stair hacked centuries ago into the mountain's flank. Ash fluttered like black snow. In her first weeks, she had coughed blood from it. Now her lungs knew its lick and did not rebel. The stair opened onto the great gallery, a cavern wide as any sept, its ceiling strewn with stalactites shaped like petrified fangs. Lakes of green glass marked sites where dragonfire had slagged rock in elder days. The Targaryens' wrought iron chains still hung from sconces, clattering when tremors rattled the aisle. Lyanna hated their rattle, and hated more the memory that men once used them to leash living fire. She had vowed no chain would bite Cerys. He roamed as he willed, held only by their bond and by the rising tide that walled Dragonstone off from spies most days. Even this sanctuary had begun to feel small. Cerys now brushed stalactite tips when he jumped from ledge to ledge. Soon he would crave sky from dusk to dawn. She felt it each time he launched, the way her own ribs seemed to open and beg wind into spaces they could never fill. A tremor rippled underfoot. Small stones skittered across obsidian. Lyanna steadied herself on Ceri's foreleg, listening. Dragonmon's belly groaned often, but this vibration felt wrong. Steady, rhythmic, like hammers on a distant gate. She stepped toward a fissure that acted as a natural sound pipe to the courtyard above. Voices drifted faint. Iron rang. Hoofbeats clopped. Visitors. She bit her lip hard enough to taste copper. Only one man besides Ned and the wall captain knew she lived. Howland Reed, whose crannogmen had guided supply ships through shoals when storms upset the usual lane. Yet Ned's letters spoke of another soon-appointed Lord of Dragonstone, Stannis Baratheon, Robert's somber brother. Robert had not yet found time, or will, to wrest the bleak island from the sea. But perhaps Stannis had grown impatient. Lyanna's breath quickened. If Baratheon men found evidence of a dragon, shed scales in the courtyard drains, scorch marks too fresh, war would flare anew, and this time Dragonstone would be the pyre. She crossed to Ceres, cupped his muzzle, forced calm into her voice. "Down," she whispered. "Hide." The deep vent. On her command he crouched, then slithered toward a vent shaft at the gallery's far end that exhaled foul gases. No human could breathe there long. Ceres, born of fire, nested in its warmth with ease. She waited until the last shimmer of his tail vanished behind folded wings, then scaled a service ladder to a postern that opened into a half-collapsed corridor. Dust motes danced in sunlight, spearing through fallen roof blocks. She wove through rubble, careful to smear soot along her cheeks and tug her hood low. On the landing above the central courtyard, she paused behind a crumbled merlon. Below, a small company had assembled. 8 men, in black and gold half-plate, bearing the fiery heart-crowned stag of House Baratheon. Their surcoats hung spotless, court soldiers, not field-tested veterans. At their fore stood a tall knight in plain mail, no sigil on his cloak. His stern mouth set as if chiseled that way. Stannis, by Ned's description. Gaunt, brooding, eyes like blue slate after rain. Opposite him, greeting with hostile courtesy, was Captain Marna Wool, hair bound in a salt-stiff braid. Beside her hovered a reed-thin man in Maester's chains, Maester Pylos, formerly of the Targaryen household, who had remained out of loyalty to knowledge if not to king. Pylos bowed stiffly. Stannis surveyed the courtyard as one might a ledger, noting deficits. "The garrison is empty," he said, voice carrying. "Stores half burned, stables collapsed." He gestured to a Baratheon sergeant. "Post a watch on every tower. No scavenger is to leave until I finish counting what remains of the crown's property." His gaze sliced toward Marna. "You will answer for lacking manifest, Captain." Marna bristled, but the knight had already turned to Pylos, demanding keys, inventories, accounts of the last harvest tithe. Lyanna's nails dug crescents through her gloves. She could not remain shadowed forever. Stannis would sweep the holdfast eventually, and tunnels were fewer than men believed. Yet if she fled now, one solitary figure on the open causeway, she would rouse pursuit and risk Sarah's secrecy. Decision carved itself in instinct. She slipped back through the corridor, down the ladder, across the gallery's width to the vent. Sarah's golden eyes glowed in the gloom. His pupils widened in question. "Quiet." She breathed, pressing her forehead to the warm curve of his neck. "We wait for night." Hours blurred. She dared not kindle a torch. She counted heartbeats, measured breaths against the stifling heat, whispered snatches of the lullaby her mother once sang, wolf words in a place of dragons. Sarah's flanks rose in slow tides. The rhythm steadied her nerves. Footsteps echoed above. Soldiers mapping caverns by lantern, voices bouncing like startled birds. Once, light flickered in the passage mouth, but stale air and foul gas forced the scouts to retreat before they saw farther than 2 paces. Lyanna exhaled relief. Night at last seeped through cracks, bringing cooler drafts even so deep. She risked a slow climb to the gallery. Tread soft, breath softer. Courtyard noises had faded to a single watch bell, tolling at even intervals. She slipped to a narrow sally port that opened onto a scree slope barely navigable, even by sure-footed goats. Wind raced uphill, carrying scent of salt and kelp. Perfect. She returned for Cerys. With me, she whispered. He followed low, wings folded tight, steps silent as any sandcat's. At the mouth of the port, she slung a coil of rope over her shoulder and began the descent. Cerys flattened, sliding like molten bronze between boulders, using talon tips for purchase. Pebbles skittered. She froze. The watch bell stopped. A voice called, "Who goes there?" Footsteps on parapet. Lyanna ducked beneath an outcrop, dark as midnight. Above, a lantern traced the merlons, casting arcs of orange that failed to reach the slope. After a breath, the guard cursed the cold and resumed pacing. They continued downward until the slope leveled into tide pools. Moonlight silvered every ripple. Cerys dipped his head to lap seawater, sneezed steam, and snorted dissatisfaction. Lyanna stroked his jaw. "We fly," she said. He crouched. She climbed onto the harness, stitched from seal leather and brass buckles, heart hammering. This was madness. He had never carried her weight aloft more than a few wing beats in the gallery, but stone and spear waited if they remained. She tightened straps, felt the play give where she had allowed for growth. Prayed thread would hold. Up, she commanded. Muscles bunching, Cerys leapt. Sand exploded beneath claw tips. Wings clapped once, twice, then air caught them. They surged skyward on a column of wind, part heated by Dragonmon's vents, part conjured by the dragon's beating heart. Lyanna swallowed a scream of exultant terror. The island dropped away, courtyard torches shrinking to fireflies, the bay to a mirror shard. Stars wheeled, dizzy and bright. Cerys roared, exulting, and higher they soared, until clouds closed like a velvet curtain and wind carried the tang of storm ice. North, she thought. But north meant walls no lighter than before, and wool ships would seek her at Dragonstone, not drifting over the narrow sea. She leaned, guiding with knees and the subtle shifts they had practiced. East, then, to the stepstones? To the shattered ruins of Valyria itself? Madness. Yet in the charred libraries of the free cities might lie forgotten lore on raising dragons unseen. In the ghost-plagued streets of Valyria, no man would follow. She tasted iron, realized she had bitten her tongue. Cold intensified. Cerys banked through a gap in clouds, revealing green-black water dotted by points of lantern light, trading cogs making for pentos, perhaps. Or Lys. Farther east, no lamps. She pointed, and Cerys answered, gliding until only moon-sparked crests broke the void. Here sky dwarfed every grief, every oath. Lyanna felt tears lift from her lashes and scatter behind them like frozen petals. Near dawn, land rose. A low crescent beach backed by dunes. Cerys landed awkwardly, staggering 3 steps before folding wings. Lyanna slid from the harness, legs buckling. She laughed aloud, half sobbing from relief and exhilaration. The dragon nudged her shoulder with his brow. Sharing the humor. Fire would announce them if lit, but chill gnawed bone. Even Cerys' heat leaked into dawn wind. She gathered driftwood. He breathed a timid gout, enough to kindle without beaconing skyward. Blue flames licked the salt-bleached logs, a sign of deep dragonfire Pylos had once claimed. She warmed her hands, studying the horizon. Purple bruises bled upward where sun pressed. She forced herself to plan. Pentos lay 2 days' flight east by south, across straits patrolled by Volantine galleys. She could seek the shy maid, the smuggler cog whose captain owed wool coin, in its backwater anchorage near the Roin's mouth, and bargain passage under Tarpaulin to Cohor, or Norvus, where forests stretched endless and no crown's reach lingered. There Cerys might hunt aurochs in secrecy until grown. But if spies of Brevos whispered to Robert that a wolf-maid traveled Essos astride flame, war would sail across the sea. She ground teeth. There was no path without peril. Cerys lifted his head, nostrils flaring. Lyanna followed his gaze. On the dune ridge, a ragged silhouette stood outlined against the paling sky, man-sized, cloaked, hood thrown back. Steel flashed in one hand, not a blade, but a polished tube sparking fiery glints. A spyglass. Lyanna reached instinctively for dagger hilt. The stranger raised the other palm, empty, open and parley. Voice drifted, deep yet mild. "No harm meant, my lady." I feared the dragon's roar heralded a monster of the deep, not. He hesitated. As if worrying a name, not a stark wolf. Shock rooted her. Few in Essos would know her face. Fewer still the crest of Winterfell. She scanned the stranger's gear. Plain travel boots crusted in sand. Cloak of seal felt fastened by a copper brooch shaped like a leaf. Under salt and windwear, his lean features bore Rhoynar cast, olive skin, straight black hair. His eyes, however, were gray as stormwater. Northern eyes. He bowed slightly. "I am Jojen Waters by birth, though my sworn brothers call me Little Leaf. I serve the Green Hand and the Singer in Grey." He spoke titles she did not know, yet each syllable thrummed with perhaps truth. "Approach slow," she ordered. He complied, stepping down the dune, spyglass stowed at his belt. When Cerys growled, he halted, but did not quail. "If I meant ill, lady, I would have run when first his shadow broke the clouds. Instead I watched, and wondered what song moves a dragon's wings in these days of usurpers. I know no singers." She kept her tone iron. He smiled faintly. "All the same, a song brought me here. The singers of the forest, who dream roots and riverbeds, saw in sap and star a she-wolf wreathed in flame. They sent me to guide her east, for ice and fire must cross where the world's spine is weakest, or night will fall in tide unending." Lyanna blinked. Few outside the neck spoke of greenseers openly. "You claim Crannog blood?" "Half." He knelt, unhooked his brooch, and placed it in the sand. "Copper leaf, veins picked in jet. Sigil of the children of the forest if tales be true. Take this. Proof Howland Reed's kin still keep oaths." "Ben." She stooped warily, retrieved the brooch. Marks scratched on its underside formed runes she recognized from Howland's first secret letter, code he said only Crannog and Chosen should read. She traced them. "Trust the Frog Eater." Relief washed tingling from scalp to heel. She straightened, nodded once. "Very well. Advise." Jojen pointed east-north. "Beyond Bravo stands the island of Loreth, its north shores cliff-walled, riddled with forbidden valleys. Mists hide them year-round. In the largest valley lies a cavern miles deep, warm with volcanic vents, but masked by chill fog. No man holds it, only shadows and the occasional mad hermit. Food is scarce but seas teem. The Lorethi fisherfolk seldom brave those reefs. There a dragon might grow unseen while singers weave other distractions." "Betty." Lyanna considered. Loreth sat at edge of maps, a forgotten corner where free cities schemed little. Ned could ship letters through Bravos easily, Robert's spies less so. And if Crannogmen lore keepers had already seated safe houses there. She met Sarah's gaze. The dragon turned toward rising sun, as though drawn by a call she could not hear. She nodded. "Guide us." Jojen inclined his head in acceptance. 3 days by wing if wind holds. I have a skiff stowed in the inlet. By water it is 5 cheeks of the moon. You choose sky or tide. Tide leaves tracks," she said. "Sky leaves only stories." She climbed to Ceri's back once more. Jojen watched, admiration unhidden. Then he trotted to the dune crest, whistled, and a shaggy horse the color of wet bark emerged from behind a hump of sand. Panniers loaded. He mounted fluidly. Lyanna guided Cerys into takeoff position. The dragon hunkered, wings unfurling. Sunrise gilding every scale. Salt wind rushed. She called to Jojen. "Keep my shadow, Frog Eater." He grinned, heels digging into his horse's flanks. "The shadow leads where the leaf must grow." Cerys sprang heavenward, sand blasting outward in a fiery vortex. Lyanna's cloak snapped like wolf flags. Beneath, Jojen raced the shoreline, dwindling as gull on foam. Cloud streets parted. Sea blazed in molten copper below. Ahead, a bleak horizon waited to be rewritten. By midday they crossed a merchant lane. Cogs veered, crew shrieking oaths that peppered 6 tongues. One crossbow bolt soared, fell 100 yards short. Cerys answered with a contemptuous stream of blue fire that licked the mast top and splintered it to shards. Sails sagged. Men scrambled. Lyanna touched the dragon's neck, urging restraint. They banked northeast, out of arrow range, continuing until land fell from view, and only the deep heart of the narrow sea beat under wings. That night, they camped on a rock stack, jutting from open water. Jojen's skiff arrived at twilight, battered but afloat. He climbed the stack's ladders of natural joints as though born to stone. Together, they shared smoked eel and hard bread. Cerys slept curled about the pinnacle, tail tip flicking in dreams. Lyanna prodded their guide. Why help? Because green dreams show but 2 forks, one where ice breaks and night conquers, and one where dragonfire tempers the crack. His gaze flicked to her cut palm, the scar where Cerys first tasted her. Blood of the first men older than old Valyria. You bridge divides the singers alone cannot. Dandantiu. She poked the fire. Sparks drifted into stars. And if I fail, then we all do. So do not fail. He smiled wryly. Simple. In following days wind stiffened, bearing scent of distant snow, though sun shone fierce. Cerys' flights lengthened. His glides grew surer. Twice they rode north of a Bravasi patrol without alarm, fog concealing them, until only the thud of oars betrayed ships below. On the 4th dawn, chalk-white cliffs rose through mist. Gulls screamed. Loreth. Jojen guided them to an inlet guarded by fanged rocks. The skiff navigated narrow channels while Cerys perched sentinel above, ready to torch any curious sail. At the inlets, a waterfall poured from a crack 50 feet up, its plunge lost in steam that rose where warm springs met icy tide. Behind the curtain of water yawned a mouth tall as a holdfast gate. Lyanna dismounted on a ledge veiled in mist and followed Jojen along a slick path. The cavern beyond swallowed sound. Bioluminescent fungi studded walls with ghost lamps. Far inside the mountain, heat shimmered. Pools reflected her torchlight like panes of black glass. Stairways of natural limestone wound upward to unseen chambers. Every surface dripped. Cerys padded in, nose wrinkling at the mingled scents of sulfur and damp earth. He inhaled, exhaled a lazy plume. The cavern's moisture hissed but did not ignite. Accepting. He prowled deeper, echoing footsteps thunderous. Lyanna surveyed the vastness. Hell have space. And privacy, Jojen added. Lorathi myths speak of ghosts here. Men thought the cavern cursed long before our time. They rarely dare. He shed his pack, produced jars of rendered seal fat, and set about lighting stone bowls fixed to ledges. Glow spread, revealing carvings half eroded. Weirwood faces stylized into shapes older than human handiwork. She traced a glyph with trembling fingers. A circle encircling a spiral. Children of the forest sign for union of flame and frost. This place awaited you, Jojen said quietly. Days flowed like underground rivers. Jojen slipped in and out, hunting seal, fishing tidal pools, returning with gossip, gleaned at lonely Lorathi hamlets. Words of a golden king grown fat with grief, of a hand hunted by crowns made of debt, of ravens lost between the Erie and White Harbor. Lyanna listened, fed Cerys marrow bones, honed her bow, and learned the slow discipline of survival. She mapped tunnels, marking vents that breathed sweetest air, pools least tainted by minerals. She carved steps, where footing proved treacherous, built a pen of drift logs for drying meat, sewed new straps to Cerys' harness to match monthly growth. The dragon thrived. Wing membranes darkened to near black, mottled by veins that shimmered copper. Flame sharpened to a spear of cobalt edged in white, so pure it hurt the eye. He learned to break mid-dive, to roll in pursuit of gulls that dared nip his tail. Lyanna rode daily, skimming wave tops, weaving through sea stacks, once even racing a passing storm cloud until thunder drowned her laughter. Yet not all news favored peace. Jojen brought rumor that Stannis Baratheon had found melted hoofprints in Dragonstone's courtyard, a scrap of scorched wolf fur in a tower room, claw marks where no hound could leap. He scoured the island, questioned Pylos until the maester's mind frayed, posted ravens to King's Landing. So far the court dismissed his claims as salt fever, but Stannis did not yield. Soon he would sail to Braavos, seeking sell-sail proof. The rim of safety tightened. Lyanna wrote letters in ciphered knots of string, one to Ned, one to Benjen if he still lived, and entrusted them to Jojen's next voyage. She sealed each with resin from cave pines, impressed with the copper leaf brooch. Betrayal could undo all, but without news from home, she felt adrift. On nights, when cold crept even through dragon-warmed stone, she dreamt of Winterfell, the scent of baked bread, the creak of the broken tower stair, Bran's whoop as he leapt hay bales. She woke often with tears crusting lashes, and Sarah's lulled her back to rest with a thrumming hum deep in his chest. Summer's height came late in Lorath, but when it arrived, it painted the cliffs with carpets of violet mallow. Lyanna wandered those meadows barefoot while Sarah's hunted aloft. Jojen joined occasionally, teaching her songs of the neck that mimicked marshbird calls. He spoke seldom of green dreams, save to warn that one vision recurred. Shadows on a wall of ice. A sword aflame but quenched in black water. A dire wolf frozen in a crown of snow. We near crossroads, he would say, and many paths die behind us unopened. One dawn Lyanna found Sarah's perched on a rocky spur, head cocked to eastern sky. Wind carried scents of desert spice and warm earth. Sothorios winds, rare this far north. The dragon unfurled wings wide as Drummond's sails, gave a questioning rumble. She followed his gaze. A pinprick of darkness stained the sunrise, growing swiftly. A raven, but no common bird. Feathers shimmered silver blue. Wings beat unhurried, defiant of gusts. It folded neatly onto Sarah's horned pole, dropped a cylinder of bone bound in golden thread, and launched skyward without pause. Lyanna broke the seal. Inside lay parchment of fine Volantine stock, ink dark and precise. Lady of flame and frost, it began. Your secret breathes across seas, whispered by things without tongues. The world stirs. When next the comet bleeds across the vault, ride the dragon to Cahor's black pool. There, under moon reflection, the god of red hands and the god of deep wood shall bargain their ruin for your hope. It bore no signature, only the imprint of a three-headed dragon crowned with a weeping heart. She read it thrice. Spine chilled though sun warmed her hair. Cahor was leagues distant, its dense forest guarding an old god that demanded blood, and gave steel that could drink magic. Who dared summon her there? A trap, perhaps, forged by Stannis or Varys the spider. Yet the letter mentioned twin faiths, Orlar's red priests, and the old god's singers of the trees. Could both align? She tucked parchment into her jerkin and found Jojen by the tide pools, mending a net. He read the letter, frown deepening. Too soon, he muttered. The comet is nigh. Scriptures agree. It should gleam before harvest's end. Cahor sits far, but Sarah's might cover it in a fortnight with rest. His eyes lifted, haunted. Dreams say steel of black water can wound the night itself. If such steel must be hers, she must risk snares. Days of debate ensued. Finally, cautious yet compelled, Lyanna resolved to ride. Jojen would sail coastlines, meeting at a Rhoyne tributary near Norvus should things sour. She packed light, bough of weirwood laminate, gift from Jojen, strung with sinew cured in dragon heat, dagger of castle-forged steel, coin pouches bearing stags and occasionally a dragon if pressed, and her mother's silver wolf head hair clasp. On the eve of departure, a storm crashed the cliffs, wind ululating like lost giants. Lyanna stood at the cavern mouth, cloak plastered wet, watching lightning skewer the distant sea. Cerys prowled restive circles, sparks dancing along fangs with every hiss. She slid a palm over his scales, felt thunder answer inside them both. "Tomorrow," she said. They launched at dawn on a southern wind smelling of ozone. Lorith vanished under curling surf. They rose above storm remnants, high enough to taste the thin bite of upper air. Cerys moved with tireless rhythm. Lyanna lost hours to the beat of wings and the hypnotic smear of clouds. By dusk they sighted islands off Pentos, turquoise lagoons ringed with coral. They rested among palms where monkeys screamed in terror at the dragon's arrival. Cerys contented himself with 40 of them before curling amid their trunks, tail coiled. The next leg carried them inland over the flat quilt of the disputed lands, farms unspooling in endless squares. Merchants on shattered roads shrieked and dove into ditches as shadow swept them. Crossbowmen loosed quarrels that plinked off Cerys' hide like hail against castle shutters. Lyanna glimpsed banners of 3 daughters Sellswards, but none dared pursuit. They reached Norvos on the 6th day. The city rose tiered upon a hill, bell towers tolling midday. Lyanna guided Cerys to circle wide, avoiding panic, then landed in a secluded orchard miles upstream. Jojen, true to word and uncanny luck, pulled a flat-bottomed skiff into the inlet by dusk. He bore grim tidings. Scouts of the Golden Company reported a dragon seen soaring over the disputed lands. Ravens already winged toward kings, landing selling their information to whoever paid. Someone would tie threads soon. Then we outrun rumor, Lyanna said, and at first light they continued. Cerys grew bolder each flight, testing new maneuvers. Banking through Roine canyons, skimming vineyards such that his wingtips brushed grape trellises, igniting leaves in a crackling wake. Lyanna scolded, but joy thrummed in her blood at his freedom. 12 days after leaving Lorith, they crossed into the forest of Cahor, a living labyrinth. Trees here dwarfed Winterfell's tallest pines, trunks broad as sepulchres, canopies knitting to blot sun. Cerys glided beneath branches that would shear masts from ships, yet bent under his slipstream like bowing colossi. The forest hush swallowed the world. Even insects stilled in reverence for whatever ancient thing pulsed beneath earth. Moon rose thick and orange when they breached the perimeter of the gods' clearing, a circular mirror lake black as obsidian, unmoving though breeze ruffled leaves. Cerys hovered once, then alighted at water's edge. Ripples spread not from his landing point, but from the lake center outward, as if the pool itself breathed. Torches flared among trees. Figures stepped forth. 7 red priests robed in scarlet silk, each bearing a staff tipped with living flame. Opposite them, 7 singers clad in mottled grays and greens, faces tattooed with swirling leaf patterns. Between the 2 sevens stood a single man armored in Valyrian plate that glistened like oil. No sigil, helm under arm. When he raised his head, moonlight caught cheekbones pale as ivory and hair white gold. A Targaryen. Lyanna dismounted, every muscle taut to die. Cerys hissed low but stayed. The Targaryen bowed, not court shallow but deep as a supplicant. "Lady Lyanna Stark." "Yes, I know who stands before me. I am Aenar Rivers, once prince in all but name. And I kneel not for stolen crowns or lost thrones, but for the life of the world, hanging by threads your dragon might weave anew." Firelight danced on water, painting Aenar's reflection as twin, one upright, one inverted, both flickering Z. He extended an object, a sword, sheathed, hilt bound in raw wolfhide, stitched with red gold wire. Forged in Valyria, the night before doom by the first Targaryen to dream of Westeros. Its name was lost. Reforged now in black waters of Cahor, double-quenched in dragon blood wrought from the eggs of yore. Yet blade still awaits a rider's bond. "Damn?" Lyanna took the sword. Weight perfect, balance alive. She drew 6 inches, the steel inside darker than night, veins of crimson running like frozen lightning. It whispered across scabbard, a sound like distant wolves. Aenar nodded toward the lake. "The god within this pool blesses only those willing to pay truth for truth." blood for blood. If you would bind dragon steel, you must offer what you cling to most. Her heartbeat hammered. She thought of Winterfell's hearths, of Ned's quiet wisdom, of Brandon's wild laugh now ashes. But deeper still, the thing she clung to was herself. Her name, her place between wolf and dragon. Could she yield even that? She faced Cerys. He stepped beside her, scales brushing her sleeve, lending silent support. She inhaled, tasting moss and smoke, and realized choice was illusion. She had offered everything years ago when she pressed bleeding palm to a cold shell. Tonight, merely sealed the vow. She slid the sword fully free, cut her left palm anew, and let blood drip into the water. The pool drank greedily, each droplet sending red tendrils blooming like roses beneath black glass. The surface stilled, then erupted, steam swirling, coalescing into the vague shape of an elk crowned with flame. Robert's sigil, she thought, and sadness pierced like arrow. But the elk bowed its antlered head to Cerys, whose breath ignited whirling sparks. The vision shattered, raining ruby motes that vanished before touching ground. Silence fell. Lyanna's palm no longer bled. A scar traced the cut, silver pale. She tested the sword edge. It shimmered, eating moonlight. When she swung lightly, air shuddered like cloth torn. She resheathed, heart steady as winter lake. The singers and red priests both knelt. Einar offered a small casket of blackwood, dragonbone powder, heart fire salts, maps inked in blood. For the road that waits, he said. From the forest's depths came distant drums. Cohoric guards, perhaps, sensing intrusion. Lyanna turned to the assembly. 8 dawn I fly. Eyes met hers. Human, inhuman, ancient, and each bearer dipped head in assent. Cerys bent a knee. She climbed his back. The new sword slung across shoulders. In one smooth surge they lifted, clearing treetops in a rush of fragrant leaves and starlight. Behind, torches guttered. Chants rising, but already wind stole syllables away. Northwest now, toward home, or farther east. Chasing whispers of the red comet, she waited for pull of fate. It came, a tug like a lodestone beneath her ribs, aligning her not with Winterfell's star, nor Valyria's ruin, but with a point beyond both. The wall where ice braced against ancient dark. Green dreams spoke of cracks there, and wolves crowned in snow. She leaned, steering. Cerys roared agreement. Over forest, over river, over endless flatlands they raced, sword humming at her spine, wings booming the song of coming tempest. Somewhere in the distance, above black peaks, a smear of crimson stained the night, the first breath of a comet newly born. Lyanna smiled into wind that smelled now of pine and frost. Her 5-hour tale was nowhere near its twilight. It had only lifted from the cradle of dawn, and beneath the beating thunder of dragon wings, she whispered a vow. I will not fail. Ka. Moonlight poured like liquid ice across the rolling backs of the forest of Qohor. The vast green ocean Lyanna and Cerys had only just left behind, while the red smear of the newborn comet bled deeper into the vault overhead. Its tail etched a wound through the constellations, fiery, accusing, impossible to ignore. Each time her gaze strayed upward, Lyanna felt as though the heavens themselves harried her forward, urging haste toward a destiny that crouched somewhere beyond the northern horizon with fangs already bared. She leaned over the curve of Cerys' neck, letting her gloved hands raid the minute ripples of muscle under bronze-black scales. The way they bunched before each downstroke, the faint quiver of fatigue that warned she was keeping him too long in the air. They had flown hard since the Blackpool bargain, across the heaving Rhoyne Delta where river mists steamed in dawn pink, then northwest over the disputed lands once more, skirting the walled free city of Pentos by night, and at last out across the ragged starlit fingers of the narrow sea. Down below, galleys and dramans tangled in the stepstones channels like dark silverfish, their deck torches blinking in alarm when the dragon's shadow slid across their sails. No bolt or scorpion missile had dared hunt them yet. Speed and height were their armor. Now, hours before sunrise, the coast of Westeros unfurled beneath them. An endless mottled blanket of moon-whitened dunes and slate headlands. Somewhere beyond that ink-black shore slept armies and castles, and all the memories she had locked away. Ned's half-smile when he hid a foundling pup in his cloak. Robb's brash vow to best every master-at-arms before he turned 15. Brandon's booming laugh the day he tossed her whole into the winter town snowbank. Not one of those voices knew she breathed. Most believed her bones interred in the stark crypt she had abandoned. She tasted salt, wine or tears. She could not tell. Sarah screamed joyously and banked into the wind's white teeth. Lyanna tightened her thighs and let him climb. Higher. Cold slapped exposed skin, numbing lips and cheeks. Her cloak snapped like a flayed banner. When Sarah's leveled off, they were above the low clouds, and the world had fallen away. Here only three things existed: comet, dragon rider. She closed her eyes and let the rhythm of wings drown the whispers of doubt forming at the edges of exhaustion. North. She reminded herself, always north. Yet the straightest line would drag them above King's Landing's watchful towers and over the bubbling cauldron of rumor roiling in every tavern in the Riverlands. Better a long arc west of the King's Road, through lonely country where gold cloaks seldom ranged. She pictured an invisible path, hugging the foothills of the Mountains of the Moon, cutting across the neck on hunter trails, known solely to Crannogmen, then circling east of the last river to skirt the Shadow Tower and meet the wall near Queensgate. It would add a week, maybe two, but secrecy was worth a lifetime. She tapped two fingers against Sarah's right ridge and angled her weight. The dragon dipped a wing, altering course. A thin curl of mist trailed his wake, and for a heartbeat, crimson comet light painted those vapors blood red. Lyanna shivered at the providence, or warning. Dawn cracked open behind them. The blazing rim triggered a sudden turbulence that buffeted both rider and mount. Sarah's big shoulders heaved. His breath steamed. Lyanna felt the exhaustion she had sensed earlier solidify into dangerous tremors. They needed rest. Shelter. Below, the dark dunes changed character. A salt marsh riddled with brackish pools and scrubby heather. Lank pines clung to ridges of sand, leaning seaward like stooped crones. Beyond the marsh rose a granite headland veined with seams of glittering quartz. A ruined watchtower squatted upon its crown. No flag, no smoke from its tumbled chimneys. Perfect. She whistled 3 descending notes. Saris answered with a quick bark and spiraled earthward. Wind screeched through broken arrow slits as talons scraped moss-slick stone, and the dragon settled atop the parapet more gracefully than his bulk suggested. Lyanna unclipped harness straps with fingers stiff from chill, swung down, staggered on jelly legs, and forced herself to complete a warrior's landing. Knees bent, weight on balls of feet, so she did not crumple like a novice. The tower interior yawned open to the sky. Roof long since collapsed. Sea fog churned in the skeletal timbers. She tugged free a pinch of resin-soaked kindling from her saddlebag, but before she struck flint, Saris exhaled a controlled line of cerulean flame across the debris heaped against one wall. In an instant, dry pine and weathered oak blazed, driving back the damp like a fleeing army. Lyanna's bones ached gratefully at the heat. She fed the dragon strips of cured aurochs and the last of Cahoric moondates, then coaxed him to curl in the lee of the stonework. His eyes hooded. Ember glow leaked between slitted lids. Within a dozen breaths he was asleep, the bellows of his lungs raising and lowering her makeshift pillow. His folded forearm, like the gentle swells of a harbor. Lyanna dozed too, though her dreams jittered under the comet's scarlet glare. She saw a wall of ice splintering, saw wolves made of snow howling at an enemy whose face she could never quite discern. Something vast moved in the dark behind those dream images. Something with a crown of cold blue radiance, and eyes that fixed on her with prehistoric hunger. She woke slick with sweat despite the chill. Late morning sun slanted through the jagged holes in the tower's northern wall. Lyanna rose, slung her bow across her back, and padded down a spiral stair choked with debris in search of fresh water. She located a cistern fed by a roof gutter still half intact. With a silver cup, she siphoned clear rain pooled atop a scum of rotting leaves, then climbed back to decant it into a skin. The mundane rhythm calmed her. When she returned, Ceres was already awake, nostrils twitching toward the seaward breeze that slipped through cracks. She scratched the underside of his jaw where softer scales overlapped, and he whuffed contentment though tension coiled in his tail. "I know," she murmured. "We should move." By midday they were aloft again, cutting a shallow inland arc that took them over rolling farmland, browned by late summer heat. Fields of half-reaped barley, neat orchard rows of apples too heavy for branches bowed in surrender. Laborers gaped skyward, then dropped to knees or scattered. Lyanna's stomach clenched. Fear was a tide she could not yet stem, and each terrified shriek echoed around her heart like an accusation. But until the realm accepted dragonfire as salvation and not apocalypse, secrecy demanded no lingering. Shortly after sunset, they angled over the valley of the Blackwater Rush, where, far to the southeast, King's Landing's beacon glow would ordinarily smudge the horizon. Tonight haze thick with wood smoke obscured the capital's shimmer. Same haze smeared moonlight into a sickle of tarnished bronze. Lyanna permitted herself only the briefest glance before pushing Ceres northwest, straight toward the Kingswood's tangled heart. Beneath their shadow ancient oaks shook leaves in protest as hawks and owls burst from limbs, startled. Here, the air tasted of resin and moss, wood rot and fox musk. She recalled half-remembered childhood tales of Kingswood Brotherhood outlaws, and the giant white hart that had evaded every king's hunt since the conquest. When Ceres swept over a moon-silvered glade, she half expected to spy that mythical stag. Instead, a different glimmer claimed her eye, firelight flickering among trees. She nudged Ceres into a low glide. Below, a small encampment huddled under canvas painted with faded green stripes. No royal banners, no Lannister crimson. Maybe poachers, maybe worse. Most folk would flee a dragon, but one or two might respond with knotwork nets impregnated with wildfire, or a marish bolt tipped with scorpion venom. Take no chances. She signaled an assent. The dragon pumped once, twice. Yet on the third stroke froze mid-beat, wings splaying in a seizure-like shiver. Lyanna's blood iced. Ceres twisted through his head and screamed, not fear, but a sound of raw surprise. Below, a second blaze leapt up, this one jade green and unnaturally bright. Wildfire. The air itself trembled, and the dragon's limbs spasmed again. Lyanna clutched his neck ridge as bank and altitude failed. She dimly recalled Tyrioforel's treatises on wildfire nets. How alchemists wove thin tendrils of burned glass through greenish pitch fumes, creating a cloud that intoxicated reptiles with heat beyond heat. Bliss that turned quickly to agony. Panic roared in her, then cold purpose quenched it. "Climb!" she shouted into the scaled windbreak. No response. Ceres' pupils had blown wide. Tongue lolled, steaming. They were losing height fast, treetops spearing upward like lances. No options but dive through. She braced, whispered a promise she was not sure he could hear, and kicked the ridge behind his skull. Hard. Reflex overrode stupor. Wings snapped together, and they dropped like a meteor. The tree line swallowed them with a shriek of cracked branches. Lyanna's shoulder smashed against the bowstave. Her right leg glanced a bow, pain flared electric. Then they hit earth in an explosion of leaf litter, pine needles, and loam. Everything rang. Ceres heaved, trying to draw breath. One wing lay twisted at an awkward angle, but not, she thought, broken. Lyanna tore her foot free from a tangle of root and stumbled toward his snout. His eyes darted in confusion. Green flame halo clung to his nostrils like ghost embers. She cursed, unslung her water skin, and emptied the cold contents over his nose and maw. Steam roiled. He coughed once, again, expelling a filament of luminescent green vapor. A third cough came easier. His pupils shrank a fraction. Shouts rang through woods, men running. She glimpsed silhouettes backlit by wildfire glow, nets of shimmering filaments stretched between poles. 5, 6 hunters fanning into a semicircle. She counted 2 scorpions with short arms mounted on trestle tables, and a heavy steel jar slung at each one's base. Likely more wildfire charges. Time splintered. She whipped the weirwood bow from her back, knocked an arrow tipped in steel. Drew, loosed. The shaft vanished through a scorpion crewman's throat. He toppled without sound. Another arrow. Another. 2 men fell. Shouts turned to screams. Formation broke. But the scorpion on her left loosed before she silenced it. A thick quarrel shrieked, trailing a thin glass sphere on a chain that burst against the shattered trunk, only yards from Sarah's haunch. Fire erupted backward, wreathing bark in emerald tongues that licked hungrily toward scale and flesh. Lyanna sprinted, unsheathing the Valyrian blade in a single fluid pull. Thorn bushes slashed her calves. Plumes of wildfire heat scorched bare thigh where cloak had torn. She ducked under a hurled net. Filament hissed overhead like angry wasps, and emerged on the flank of the scorpion carrier. 2 men turned too late. The black water blade sang once. Moon-flecked edges parted leather, mail, bone as though all were mere vapors. Heads tumbled. A final foe lunged, a crude Myrish hook in hand. Her riposte removed wrist at mid-forearm and severed his throat on the same motion. Blood sprayed in an arc that hissed when droplets struck stray wildfire sparks, igniting brief hellish pops. Behind her, the dragon found his roar again. Cerys rose, back legs bunching, wings mantling as far as pain allowed, and exhaled a jet of true cobalt flame that devoured wildfire glow in an instant. The hotter blaze snuffing the alchemist trick like candle beneath bell jar. The remaining hunters fled shrieking into dark. Cerys limped after them 3 paces, claws gouging earth. But Lyanna's sharp whistle recalled him. She reached his side, panting, sword slick with gore. A line of shallow punctures along the wing membrane wept smoke. She pressed a hand to his shoulder. Heat flared but steady, not feverish. Wildfire's trance had broken. She wiped blade clean on moss. Sheathed, and turned to salvage what she could. A saddlebag of fresh water. A jar of unspent alchemical putty. Dangerous but useful. And from the dead leader's belt a rolled parchment sealed with wax. The seal jolted her. Robert's symbol, but adjusted. Inside the heart, a smaller flame. She broke it and unscrolled. Orders in precise Stormland cursive. Take the creature alive if possible. Kill the rider, for her existence is a lie that binds a king in chains of grief. Deliver the beast to Storm's End for study. By Stannis Baratheon's command, in the name of the realm. Beneath, the signature. Sir Davos Cauran, hand to Lord Stannis. Not Robert's. Stannis had moved faster than any rumor. She crumpled the parchment, flung it into still-burning wildfire patches, and watched red wax blister and curl to ash. Her pulse thudded. They were hunted now not only by whispers, but by disciplined forces funded by Stormland coffers. How many such brigades had Stannis appointed? How many jars of glass wildfire? She inhaled to steady herself, caught scent of burned pine, charred flesh, and the copper tang of her own blood where bramble thorns had flayed her shins. We go, she told Cerys. Dawn bruised the eastern sky purple. The dragon nudged her hip. Expression, a mix of lingering discomfort and apology. She stroked his neck. Not your fault. Painful minutes passed as she rigged a temporary sling of linen strips to support the damaged wing spar for flight. Cerys tolerated the manipulation, though each knot drawn tight elicited a growling rumble. At last they were airborne again, but altitude cost him. The wing beat asymmetry bled speed. They kept low among rolling foothills until midday, when the pair reached the mouth of a hidden valley that Jojen's maps had called the Maiden Fountain. A secret haunt of the Brotherhood without banners once, now abandoned. She guided Cerys into a sheltered grotto framed by curtain vines and allowed him to collapse on a bed of fern. Water tinkled from travertine ledges into a clear pool, She bathed his wounds, smeared them with unguent brood, from ground ghost pepper seed and sweet oil. A salve Jojen had sworn sped dragon healing. Sarah's lids drooped. Sleep claimed him. Lyanna rechecked her own injuries and found no deep gashes, only scrapes and a forming bruise the size of a quail egg at her hip. She cleaned, wrapped, then paced the grotto restlessly, scanning sky for scout kites or ravens. Nothing but the comet, now bright enough to pale daylight. That night she lit no fire. Sarah's internal furnace warmed the air more than flames could. She gnawed salted goat jerky, drank sparingly, and turned over possibilities. They could angle farther west, hug the riverland's chaotic patchwork of petty lords, who might hide them for gold or principle. But wildfire hunters would haunt every major trunk road. East lay the Vale, too mountainous for Sarah's still-healing wing and full of Arryn loyalists indebted to Stannis since Robert's ascent. South was folly. Only the direct path north remained, straight through the neck, shadowed by bogs and illusions only the reeds mastered. She wished Jojen were with her. He would know secret causeways, frog passages above and below water. She touched the copper leaf brooch pinned to her torn cloak, and whispered the simplest prayer Mother had taught. Let the old gods keep the paths clear. Sarah snored and puffed smoke rings that drifted to vanish against stone. She allowed herself a small, weary laugh. We keep each other alive, she told him, though he slept. They rested 2 days. On the morning of the third, wing membrane had knit enough for shallow flapping. She removed the sling and watched him stretch. No wince. She rubbed his shoulder and smiled. North it is. They left Maiden Fountain, under thunderclouds. Rain sheathed the hills, masking them from skywatchers. Sarah's flight smoother, though slower. They hunted en route, rode deer. A lone aurochs bull that charged until cobalt fire melted its horns to slag, fattening stores of meat for leaner stretches. The Ironman's Bay came into view as a silver plate flecked with whitecaps. They took shelter in a hollow above Seaguard's wide fens, witnessing from a safe height the red wine fleet anchored off Fair Isle, banners limp in drizzle. No ships patrolled the marsh's inner lagoons. An open door. They pressed on at dusk, crossing swamp-mouth tributaries of the Trident. Fog curled thick, perfect for hiding. Soon reeds replaced pines, and the land sagged into sloughs ripe with midges. The neck. Night 2 in the bog, a familiar whistle cut through the frog's chorus. 2 quick, 1 long, 1 short tidy. Lyanna froze. Another whistle answered from her left. Pattern Jojen had drilled. She cupped hands, returned the code. From behind a curtain of hanging moss emerged 3 crannogmen clad in patchwork leather and reed mantles, spears barbed with obsidian. At their head Jojen smiled, dim in torchless gloom. Well met, Lady of Flame, he greeted. Dreen said to watch the western sky for the comet's tail dragging a broken wing. Relief crumpled her legs. She closed the distance, seizing his forearm. Stannis hunts. Wildfire nets. Jojen's small smile thinned. We crippled 1 hunter band near the Causey Stones yesterday, burned their jars, sent survivors hobbling to Moat Cailin with lies about white bears. More will follow. Then Chawan. They turned to Cerys, who inhaled the bog scents warily, as though expecting more poison clouds. The crannogmen bowed from the waist. 1 woman stepped forward and sprinkled water from a carved wooden cup across the dragon's muzzle, while chanting in a language older than trees. The wet hissed against his scales. He closed eyes in bemusement but remained still. Lyanna recognized the ritual. Swamp blessing toward sickness and spite. Jojen guided them onto a floating mat of brush, cunningly lashed to half-submerged logs. Beneath the camouflaged mass lay a barge wide as 3 wagons abreast, hidden by lily pads and duckweed. Crannogmen pulled it so silently the only giveaway was the gentle lap of water on hull. They threaded a labyrinth of channels between towering rushes and ghostly white birch. Her sense of direction faltered. Even the comet vanished in mist. Yet Jojen moved with easy confidence. Hours later, the barge nosed into a reed-ringed aisle, no larger than a Winterfell courtyard. Huts of woven willow perched on stilts, their thatched roofs shaped like overturned coracles. Lanterns hung inside glowed with foxfire captured in glass globes, casting green-gold halos. The settlement erupted in hushed awe when Cerys padded ashore, but none ran. Children stared wide-eyed. Elders touched brow and chest in blessing gestures. The frog-eaters, it seemed, had accepted prophecy's burden. They lodged Lyanna in the largest hut, floor laid with soft moss and pelts. Cerys coiled nearby, snout protruding into the doorway so his breath could warm her feet. Jojen debriefed her over bowls of eel stew and mead, sweetened with marshberries. Ned Stark rides to Moat Cailin route as we speak, he revealed. He brings fewer men than a boar's tusks, but hearts fierce. Robb musters in the south. War again? He sipped, eyes clouding. Ravens whisper that winter chooses this season to deepen. Snow's heavy already in Wolfswood, though. Still autumn, by reckoning. Lyanna clasped her steaming bowl to hide trembling fingers. Then we cannot linger. I must reach the wall before Snowground's dragon wings. Jojen set his cup aside. A dry causeway, guarded passage, runs from Greywater to the King's Road Mile Castle. Only my father holds that secret. We will guide you. 3 days they spent among the frogs, re-equipping. Crannog smiths riveted fresh steel reinforcements onto Cerys' harness, subtle plates shaped like lily leaves that overlap to allow flex without weight penalty. They coated leathers with pine tar and ash to dull any reflection. For Lyanna, they produced a cloak woven from the throat skins of giant swamp lizards, iridescent yet matte, shedding water better than oiled silk. She accepted with gratitude and a pang. Northmen were not prone to gifting rare treasures lightly. On the fourth dawn they departed, a procession of 6 skiffs gliding in file, dragon overhead like a silent guardian. Mist closed behind them, swallowing huts. By midday they reached a ridge of tumbled paving stones older than the first men. Jojen's uncle, Lord Howland Reed himself, waited astride a little shag-nosed horse, graying hair braided with feathers. His green eyes crinkled with memory and sorrow when he looked on Lyanna. Daughter by summer bond, he greeted quietly. The peers I fought beside in Tower of Joy days are almost spent. Glad am I one spark still flies. She dismounted to clasp his forearms. Words failed. Reed nodded as though hearing them anyway. He led them onto the hidden causeway, a winding path of tussock and sunken slabs that never dipped beneath the fen's glassy skin more than a man's calf. From bank to bank, the bog stretched miles in all directions, stabbing reeds tall as small trees. Night brought chill that seeped even through lizard skin cloak. Cerys hunted lamprey from the air, torching patches of open water and seizing stunned fish in scythe claws. On the second night, camped amid stunted alder, Reed produced an aged parchment inked in Maester runes. A gift from Eddard, he said, passing it to her. He cannot come south. Freys nibble his flanks and Lannister gold clogs every river. But he sends this. She unrolled the sheet. It bore the Stark direwolf stamped in black window wax, and beneath, her brother's unmistakable square lettering. If you read this, know the wall falters. Rangers vanish beyond Eastwatch. Maesters mutter of corpse things walking in the haunted forest. I march with what men can be spared to Castle Black. If your road bends that way, bring whatever fire the old gods grant. A postscript in smaller scrawl. Tell our father's shade I keep his vows. Lyanna reread until the words etched behind her eyes. She folded the parchment, tucked it over her heart, and stared long at shivering campfire sparks drifting upward like fledgling stars. Wind carried distant drumming. Frog chimes, or maybe the heartbeat of the whole bog urging her onward. At dawn they breached higher, firmer ground where scraggy pines thickened into forest. The hidden causeway met the King's Road at a moss-clad marker stone toppled sidewise. There Howland Reed and 2 boatswains parted with silent bows, melting back into reeds. Jojen remained, of course, guiding her north under the eaves of towering green. Traffic thinned the farther they pressed. One shabby wagon train of millers fleeing south. 3 Wintertown crofters pushing hogs. A mail-coated Bolton outrider who eyed Sarah's shadow overhead and cantered away wordlessly. Evening of the 4th day revealed the ice-fanged silhouettes of the wall, a paler blue streak beneath the comet's now ominous flare. Queensgate sat crumbling at its foot, torches guttering along parapets. Lyanna's breath caught, memories of childhood stories flooding. Of watchmen in black. Of the wall's face weeping when sun felt strong. Of old Nan's endless caution that beyond that ice curtain, nothing good born of daylight trod. No time for reverie. She sent Jojen ahead as envoy with her writ sealed by Reed and Stark. She circled Sarah's high over the tree line, waiting. Below, tiny figures at the gate argued, pointed, eventually waved torches in a pattern that meant approach. She angled the dragon down, careful to land on a patch of rocky scree, far enough from stoneworks to avoid toppling ramparts with downdraft. Black brothers spilled from the gate, cloaks snapping. At their head strode a tall, spare man whose eyes, pale and piercing as cracks in glacier, fixed on her. By description, she knew him. Lord Commander Jorah Mormont. He raised a gloved hand in greeting. Beside him stood a lean ranger with sable hair touched by frost and a bastard's haunted expression. Jon Snow, if rumor held true, Eddard's own blood though never named son. A quiet thrill pierced her heart at the sight of her nephew grown near manhood. She dismounted and bowed curtly. Jojen whispered quick introductions. Mormont wasted none. Lord Stark rides from the south with near 2,000. He sent raven of your coming, though its words were cryptic. His gaze slid to Sarah's, smoldering at the rear like a mobile forge. Brothers shuffled. Lyanna met that gaze. I come with fire to meet the night. Open your gates or let me build pyres in the woods. Either way, the wall will need flame. Flame's dangerous, muttered a scarecrow-thin steward. Samwell Tarly, perhaps. Lyanna pulled the Blackwater sword from its back sheath and angled the blade to catch comet glow. Crimson vines pulsed along the metal, as though it drank the celestial blood. Brothers murmured. Mormont's weathered face remained stone. I have seen corpses walk, he admitted finally. I'll take any weapon against such devilry. He extended a hand. Welcome, Lady Stark, though by rights you are dead. Dead no longer, she answered, grasping his wrist in the old northern clasp. They escorted her through the tunnel beneath the ice. A frozen throat of blue shadows. Cerys followed, ducking only twice where ceiling dipped. Frost steamed at his presence, rivulets of meltwater snaking across floor. On the far side the world opened into raw, untamed wild, a dark forest choking on silence. Camps littered the clearing. Watchmen and Stark levies mingling awkwardly. Kettle fires spitting fat onto snow. Ned stood at a map table lit by lanterns. When he saw her, his face went stricken, then soft as spring thaw. He rounded the table, caught her shoulders, eyes brimming though no tears fell. Little sister, he breathed. Warmth crashed through her chest. They embraced, and for a moment the wall, the comet, the armies, the dead things in shadow ceased to exist. But only for a moment. They convened in the command tent. Lyanna, Ned, Mormont, Jon Snow, Ser Jorah, and a grizzled ranger named Corran Halfhand. Maps spread across trestles showed ranger losses, marked red pins in tightening crescents. Beyond the Frostfangs, large clusters of unknown hostiles pinned in black. A frontier under siege. Ned spoke first. Scouts report a mass of corpses, some freshly slain, some years dead, marching under banners of no living house, blue fire in their eyes. They rend flesh. They do not burn easily unless by dragon flame. All eyes turned to Lyanna. She laid her palm on the map's northern fringe. Then dragon flame they shall have. But we must use him where wings count most. She traced ravines, ridges. Here, the gorge narrows. Funnel them. Cerys strafes, collapses ice shelves atop the host. Rangers skirmish flanks, torch what escapes. Then we ride hard east to where other clusters gather. Medicine-Noir. Mormont grunted approval. Corin asked hard questions about fuel and fatigue. Jon watched her with silent intensity. When strategy fixed, Ned dismissed all but family. Under furs he clasped her hand. Robert drinks himself into stupor nightly, he murmured. If he learns you live, she squeezed. He will live. Realm first. Realm indeed. His gaze shifted to the dragon coiled beyond the tent walls, silhouette framed by flickering torches. Is he ready? He was born of my blood, she said. He is ready when I bleed for him. That night, behind she stood atop an ice-rimmed parapet with Jon Snow, watching greenish curtains of aurora ripple across heaven. He spoke little, but when he at last asked, "What does it feel like to fly?" she told him. Like every promise you ever made your heart, kept at once. His smile flickered. Fragile. In that moment she saw Eddard's quiet honor tempered by fierce longing. Wolf and something else, maybe dragonfire glinting. Dawn brought silence so profound even wind dared not sigh. Fresh snow spangled every pine bough. Then, from gloom, a horn blew 3 blasts. Rangers at the tree line appeared first, stumbling, bloodied, pursued by shapes shambling but unnaturally swift. The dead. Lyanna vaulted onto Sarah's back before horns finished sounding. Jon and Corin led archers onto ramparts, while Ned marshaled pikemen in Half Moon just south of the gate. Mormont barked orders to have barrels of pitch hauled upslope. Sarah's launched, wings battering frosty air to powder. Lyanna guided him into low swoop over the first cadaver wave. Mouth opened. Cobalt inferno poured. Snow flashed to steam, ice cracked. The dead kindled like tinder. But behind them came more. Hundreds, maybe thousands, glimpsed between tree trunks, eyes blue as glacial cores. Second pass. She drew the Blackwater sword, slashed downward where the blade could reach heads cresting a ridge. Steel met flesh with unnatural ease. Sparks hissed where crimson veins etched impact. Corin's men volleyed fire arrows that Ceri's slipstream fanned into mini-cyclones of ember. Trees ignited, forging firebreak. Yet still, the dead advanced. On ground Jon Snow fought like a born wraith, long claws Valyrian edges singing. Once he slipped on ice, and 3 corpses lunged to overwhelm. Lyanna saw, screamed a warning. Cerys banked near vertical, blasted a flame line that incinerated 2, leaving the third reeling long enough for Jon to regain footing and cleave its skull. But flame ate Cerys' reserves. Each blast cost strength. Wing beats slowed. Lyanna sensed fatigue spiraling. She steered him to perch upon a rocky outcrop, jutting over the gorge. Dead surged below like ants. She pressed scarred palm to his scales. Sparks jumped skin to hide. Their bond thrummed. She offered blood again, slicing new lines across hand. He lapped, flame returning brighter. From the woodline a taller figure strode, gaunt limbs encased in ice that glimmered blue-white, a crown of hoarfrost spiking its skull. A other's liege, if such tales held truth. In its hand, a spear of frozen glass vomiting tendrils of pale mist. It pointed at her. Cold hammered Lyanna's bones, though distance gaped. Frost-filmed sword edge. Cerys growled, tail lashing. She hissed, "Fly." But he remained, trembling under dread. The thing raised its spear. A shard of crystal zipped across valley like wind-forged arrow. Cerys tried to dodge, too slow. The shard grazed his shoulder, and where it passed skin iced instantly, scale color bleaching. Lyanna screamed rage. She surged upright in stirrups, lifted the Blackwater blade in both hands, and sent every grief, every love, every oath down her arms into steel. She hurled the sword end over end. Comet light caught crimson veins mid-turn. Blade spun meteoric, trailing a ribbon of living fire drawn from some fusion of heart and sky. It struck the Ice King's square in chest. Explosion. Blue shrapnel burst outward in a halo. A sound like glaciers rending split the air. Shockwave flung corpses nearest into splinters, Where the other had stood remained nothing but drifting snowflakes already turning to steam and residual heat. The dead faltered as though invisible strings had slackened. Some dropped as inert husks. Others staggered yet retreated, clustering in confusion. Cheers erupted from men on the wall. But Lyanna's gaze was on the sword, lodged upright in the churned snow, dark blade absorbing blue shards. She leapt from saddle, ran. Heat beat against her face when she gripped the pommel. The steel thrummed alive. She yanked it free. Along its length new runes flared, tiny veins of blue fire spiraling beside red. Ice and fire bound. Behind her Ned's banners advanced, mopping remnants. Corin's horns signaled cease. Smoke of victory coiled to heaven. Night fell in uneasy peace. Rangers scoured forest for undead stragglers, but found only abandoned armor crumbling to rime. The threat, for now, had ebbed. Cerys rested under tarp, near a roaring trench fire, the ice scar on his shoulder already darkening, as if retreating. Lyanna sat beside him, sword across knees, and let exhaustion and triumph mingle in quiet tears. Ned joined her, crouching. "Father would tell you you've the wolf blood," he said softly. She half laughed. "Wolf and dragon both. And what now? Tomorrow more will come." Eastwatch ravens speak of giants in leather harness, dragging sledges of ice. "Bender away." Lyanna looked to the comet, burning ever brighter. "Then we teach them that flame and frost together forge steel, stronger than either alone." Ned followed her gaze. "Robert will learn you live." She nodded. "Let him come. If his heart cannot bear truth, then I will bear sorrow. But the realm will see dawn." Beyond the wall, auroras parted to reveal stars shimmering like scattered embers. Somewhere deeper into night perhaps other dragons stirred in old vales, woken by the comet's clarion call. But here, in this ice-ringed clearing, one dragon's slow steady breaths mingled with the sigh of northern wind, and a woman once thought lost watched over both sky fire and earth snow, poised between doom and deliverance. Dawn's first pale band touched the wall's crest, turning every frozen crenellation rose gold. Lyanna rose, sheathed her living blade, and laid a hand upon Cerys' brow. His eyes opened, molten amber meeting her ice blue. She smiled, soft but fierce. 5 hours, she whispered, recalling the promise she had made at Dragonstone's gate. "We are nowhere close to finished." The dragon's answering rumble rolled into the breaking morn like thunder heralding a storm yet to sweep the land, and together they turned toward whatever horizon next demanded light.